Oak Haven, Pennsylvania, is the kind of town where front doors are left unlocked and the police blotter's biggest entry is usually a deer hitting a windshield on County Road 9. It is a place insulated by geography and tradition, where everyone's history is public knowledge. Sarah Jenkins was the heartbeat of that history. At 34, she was the charge nurse at Oak Haven Community Hospital's ER. She was the woman who held your hand while you got stitches, who remembered your mother's birthday, and who brought extra casseroles to shut-ins during snowstorms. Sarah was, by every account, goodness personified. She was reliable as the sunrise, which is why, on a crisp Tuesday morning in October, when Sarah failed to show up for her 6 a.m. shift, a cold spike of dread pierced the community's collective chest. Sarah was last seen Monday evening leaving the hospital. A CCTV camera captured a grainy wave to a security guard at 7:15 p.m. She drove her Subaru Outback home, a small bungalow she'd inherited from her grandmother. By 8 a.m. Tuesday, the police were at her door. The house was pristine. Her nursing scrubs for the next day were neatly folded on the ironing board. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle. The first real tremor of fear hit at 10:30 a.m. A state trooper noticed a Subaru parked at the trailhead of Miller's Ridge, a dense, wooded area just outside town limits. It was Sarah's car. It was locked. Her purse, containing her wallet and phone, was tucked underneath the driver's seat. Her keys were gone. The initial theory was swift and terrifying, a random act of violence. Oak Haven sits near an interstate corridor. The working assumption was that a drifter, a predator passing through, had spotted a lone woman on an evening walk and seized the opportunity. For 2 weeks, Oak Haven held its breath. Search parties combed the dense autumn woods, their calls for Sarah echoing uselessly against the timber. Candlelight vigils illuminated the town square. The fear was palpable. Inhabitants began locking their doors, eyeing strangers with suspicion. They wanted a monster they didn't know to be responsible. It was easier than considering the alternative. Detective Mark Henderson, a man who had known Sarah since kindergarten, led the investigation. As the physical search yielded nothing but frustration, Henderson knew he had to pivot. He had to dismantle the saintly image of the woman he'd grown up with and look at the human being underneath. We had to stop looking for where she was and start looking at who she was when nobody was watching, Henderson later told reporters. The deep dive into Sarah's digital and financial life began to erode the portrait of the simple, contented small-town nurse. The first fissure appeared in her bank statements. Sarah made a decent living, yet her savings were hemorrhaging. Over the past 6 months, nearly $25,000 had been withdrawn in a series of cash transactions. Where was the money going? There were no expensive purchases, no lavish trips. Then came the phone records. While her main phone revealed nothing unusual, Henderson found a receipt for a burner phone bought 4 months prior. The records for that phone showed hundreds of calls and texts to a single number, often late at night. The number belonged to someone in town, not a secret lover, as many began to whisper, but someone far more unexpected. The number belonged to Elias Vance, a local contractor known mostly for his checkered past, and a severe gambling addiction that had nearly cost him his family years prior. The town reeled. Sarah Jenkins, the angel of mercy, secretly funneling tens of thousands of dollars to a known degenerate like Elias Vance? The narrative shifted violently. Had Vance blackmailed her? Had they been having an affair gone wrong? Police brought Vance in. He was a jittery, broken man, terrified of the interrogation room. But his story wasn't one of malice. It was one of pathetic desperation. "She wasn't sleeping with me," Vance stammered, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "She was sponsoring me." Vance explained that he had relapsed hard into online poker. Sarah had found out, not as a lover, but as his AA sponsor years ago. When he fell off the wagon, he went to her, begging for help to keep his house from foreclosure. Sarah, unable to turn away someone in need, began lending him money, draining her grandmother's inheritance. "She told me that Monday night. She told me she was done," Vance confessed. "She said I was bleeding her dry and she couldn't do it anymore. She was going to tell my wife if I didn't check myself into a clinic. Vance had a motive, silencing her to protect his secret, but he also had an alibi. At the time Sarah vanished, Vance was 3 towns over, visible on casino security footage, feeding quarters into a slot machine. Vance wasn't the killer, but he was the key. Henderson went back to the financial records with new eyes. Sarah was giving Vance cash. Where was she getting it? The $25,000 from her savings was gone. But in the month before she disappeared, 2 deposits totaling $10,000 had hit her account, only to be withdrawn days later. The source of those deposits was the Oak Haven Community Hospital Employee Benevolent Fund, a charitable account meant to help staff in crisis. Sarah was the treasurer of that fund. The realization hit Henderson with the force of a physical blow. Sarah wasn't just helping Vance. She was embezzling to do it. The saint was stealing. The investigation turned inward, toward the hospital that was Sarah's second home. Who else had access to those books? Who would have noticed the discrepancy? The answer was the man who signed off on the audits, Dr. Richard Albright. Dr. Albright was hospital royalty, a brilliant surgeon, a deacon at the First Methodist Church, a man whose portrait hung in the lobby. He was practically Sarah's mentor. Henderson brought Albright in for what was ostensibly a routine follow-up on hospital procedures. The detective laid the financial records on the table. We know Sarah was taking money from the fund, Doctor. We know she was giving it to Elias Vance. What we don't know is why you signed off on the audits that covered it up. Dr. Albright, always composed, always patrician, seemed to shrink in his chair. The silence in the interrogation room stretched, taut as piano wire. It wasn't just Sarah, Albright finally whispered, his voice devoid of its usual confident resonance. The truth was a sickening tapestry of mutual destruction. Dr. Albright had his own demons. A disastrous real estate investment in Florida that was threatening to bankrupt him and destroy his sterling reputation. He had begun dipping into the benevolent fund first. Sarah had caught him 3 months ago. Instead of turning him in, her compassion, her fatal flaw, kicked in. She confronted him. He broke down, begging for time to replace the money. She agreed to keep his secret, forging the audit documents to buy him time. But then Sarah's own financial drain to Elias Vance became unsustainable. Desperate, she borrowed against the fund herself, intending to pay it back quickly. That Monday, the house of cards collapsed. The Regional Hospital Authority announced a surprise, independent audit scheduled for Wednesday. She called me, Albright confessed, staring at his immaculate hands. She was panicking. She said we were going to prison. She wanted to meet, to figure out a story. They met at Miller's Ridge at dusk. It was secluded, private. She was hysterical. She said she couldn't lie anymore. She said she was going to go to the police in the morning and confess everything. About me, about herself. In the gathering dark of the woods, the respected surgeon saw his life, his reputation, his wealth, his standing dissolve. I just wanted her to stop talking. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away. She stumbled. His voice cracked. There were rocks, so many rocks near the trail edge. She hit her head. The sound, it wasn't loud. It was just final. Panic overtook him. The surgeon, trained to save lives, checked for a pulse and found none. Instead of calling 911, self-preservation took over. He dragged her body deeper into the woods, covered her with brush and fallen leaves, and took her keys to make it look like an abduction gone wrong. He walked back to town in the dark. Dr. Richard Albright led police to Sarah's shallow grave the next morning. The town of Oak Haven was shattered twice. First by the loss of Sarah, and second by the revelation that the monster wasn't a drifter from the interstate. The evil had been homegrown. It wore a white coat and sat in the front pew on Sundays. It was born not of psychotic rage, but of desperate, banal greed and the terrible, lethal consequences of a good woman trying to carry the burdens of too many broken men.